Good Tuesday morning to you. For Telesur, I'm Reagan Devines in Caracas, Venezuela. Thank you for joining us from the south. We begin this morning in New York, where the Venezuelan president, Nicolas Maduro, said Guyana and Venezuela would order their ambassadors back to their respective missions. The announcement comes after a meeting between him and his Guyanese counterpart, David Granger, chaired by the United Nations Secretary General Ban Ki-moon. Ban confirmed that the UN will send a technical committee to Venezuela in the coming days to assess Caracas' claim to the Essequibo region. The disputed border between both nations goes back to Venezuela's own independence battle in the early 1800s.
I proposed to President Granger that we maintain permanent communication so as not to allow anybody to lie. To place lies is an element to provoke, to destabilize our countries in the Caribbean. For now, we will return our ambassadors to their posts. I aspire to that permanent communication to the Foreign Minister of Guyana until we achieve a more fluid relationship along with our Caribbean brothers for a more fluid relation and dialogue, and until all noises as the ExxonMobil and other countries make with the interest of seeing us confronted.
And President Nicolas Maduro will address the United Nations 70th General Assembly in a few hours. He will argue in favor of a world free of inequality that has spread misery across the globe. The South American leader will also propose a new anti-terrorist alliance that will allow for peace in the countries that have been destroyed by war. The president said he is not pleased with the wars that the United States has promoted in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria. Continuing with our coverage of the United Nations General Assembly, Bolivian President Evo Morales warned that there can be no peace without social justice. In this regard, he said that capitalism has failed, saying it is not a solution for life, much less humanity. And he called on world leaders to implement true social justice. Morales said that war is the most lucrative business for capitalism and urged countries to curb what he called outrageous military spending.
And I want to say to our Chilean brothers, especially the Chilean people, we don't want winners or losers here. We want to resolve this through dialogue and win together for the good of our people. This is Bolivia's big wish.
Cuban President Raul Castro told the United Nations General Assembly that normal relations with the United States will only be possible when Washington lifts the blockade against his country. The leader said the U.S. also needs to return the military base at Guantanamo and end anti-communist broadcasts beamed into the island. Raul Castro added that the U.S. urgently needs to end all subversion and destabilization programs against his country, and of course compensate Cubans for the human and economic damages they still endure. His statements come ahead of a meeting with his colleague Barack Obama in a few hours.
After 50 years of heroic and selfless resistance by the Cuban people, diplomatic relations were re-established between Cuba and the United States of America. Now, long and complex process begins toward the normalization of relations that will only be achieved with the end of the economic, commercial, and financial blockade, the return of Cuba of the territory illegally occupied with Guantanamo Naval Base, the cessation of radio and TV broadcasts, and of subversion and destabilization programs against the island, and when our people are compensated for the human and economic damages they still endure.
Arkansas Republican Governor Asa Hutchinson is trying to persuade the U.S. Congress to allow agricultural companies to sell to Cuba on credit. This would serve as a first step in a gradual repeal of sanctions against the Caribbean island nation. Hutchinson is the first U.S. governor to visit Cuba since Havana and Washington restored diplomatic relations in July after a 54-year break. He said the extension of credit is the next logical step in the normalization of relations with Cuba.
Next logical step to me is that Congress needs to change the law so that there can be an extension of credit for agricultural sales in particular between the United States and Cuba. And so that's the next step. that doesn't require a full lifting of the embargo.
Colombia's new justice accord with leftist FARC rebels does not imply impunity. The government leader in the talks, Humberto de la Calle, explained that this agreement meets national and international requirements. The rebels and the government agreed last week to create special courts to try former guerrillas and former military members accused of crimes committed during the 5-decade-long conflict. They also agreed to set March 2016 as a deadline for a final agreement.
It's not an impunity agreement. It meets with the national and international requirements, the standards. These standards are to investigate, prosecute and punish, and that's what's going to happen.
And now a look at other stories making news across the globe.
Germany approved tougher asylum laws at a meeting chaired by Chancellor Angela Merkel as a reaction to the current refugee crisis. The legislative package still needs approval from the upper and lower houses of parliament. Asylum procedures will be sped up considerably, and those deemed unworthy of protection will be quickly returned to their countries of origin. Germany has stepped up deportation of asylum seekers from Balkan nations to make way for people fleeing war in Syria. The presidents of Russia, Vladimir Putin, and United States, Barack Obama, met for about 90 minutes on the sidelines of the United Nations 70th General Assembly. The meeting was tense and disagreement over the fate of Syrian President Bashar Assad was notable. Putin criticized the US-led coalition for not consulting Assad and not obtaining a UN resolution before intervening in Syria. But both leaders did agree on the urgent need to form a global coalition against terrorism.
I reiterate to my colleagues that the American and French presidents, with their great respect, that they aren't citizens of Syria and so should not be involved in choosing the leadership of another country. It is the Syrians' business.
French President François Hollande warned that if during the climate change summit in Paris at the end of November an agreement is not reached, it will be too late for the world. He praised China and the United States for the recent agreement to jointly reduce carbon emissions. Hollande also pledged France would increase its climate protection budget to just over $6 billion by 2020.
Humankind, that is us. Is humankind capable of deciding that we will preserve life on this planet? That is a question, and is the kind of question that puts us at a level that is within our generation seemed unimaginable.
Afghan forces backed by U.S. air support clashed with Taliban fighters in Kunduz in a bid to retake the center of northern city. Kunduz was the first provincial Afghan capital to fall to the insurgents since their movement was toppled 14 years ago. Residents were seen leaving the area as troops and security forces moved in to fight the militants.
Now to sports. Mexican striker Javier Chicharito Hernandez is on the starting lineup for today's Champions League game against Barcelona. Chicharito told reporters that regardless of the absence of Argentine forward Lionel Messi, his new team Leverkusen will face a very difficult match against the Spanish team. Messi is out on injury for the next 2 months. Hernandez has scored twice for the German Bundesliga team, including once when his goal was the only one in the victory against Mainz last week.
The truth is that we are going to play against Barcelona. We have to play as if Messi is there or he isn't there. Focus 100% on doing the best we can, knowing the ideas and style of play of Barcelona. But with all rivals, we always see them with their strength and how we can damage them, and this is not going to be an exception.
On November 9th, the Cristiano Ronaldo documentary is scheduled to premiere worldwide, but the trailer is available and offers sequences that will stir emotions of both fans and opponents. The film is one of the world's most famous and best soccer players, as it takes a glimpse at the sacrifices that his mother has made to ensure his son's dream came true. And for more on these and other stories, please visit our website, telesurtv.net/English. For Telesur English, I'm Regan Devines. We'll have another news brief for you just after midday. Have a great day.